Hey everyone. So today I'm going to teach you about why sellers are willing to sell their mortgage note to you. And I'm going to give you 8 specific reasons why sellers will put up notes for sale. A lot of people have questions about like, well, if these notes are so good, if the yield is so great, then why is someone selling it? And there are actually a lot of really good reasons why people do that. First, before I get into those 8 reasons, I would encourage you to check the link below. We can get a free guide with 5 steps for getting started in note investing. So that's completely free. We'll also get you on my email list where you'll receive a lot of other free note investing related content on a regular basis. Okay, great. So now on to the 8 reasons why someone will sell you their mortgage note. And then these are in no particular order. But reason number one that I have is that they want to free up money for another investment. So a lot of note investors, I'd say probably the majority, are active, very active in other forms of real estate investing. So they tend to have rentals, they might be doing fix and flips, they might be doing multifamily investments, investing in other kinds of syndications and funds. And these types of folks, maybe you're one of them, always seem to have some new deal cooking. So a lot of times to take advantage of an opportunity, they might sell off some of their existing assets, and that may or may not include one or more of their notes. So that's very, very common reason for people to sell. It's actually one of the when I buy from my network and circle of friends because they know me well and know that I'll close on certain deals if they meet my criteria. These are often the kind of deals that just find me on their own and don't necessarily even hit the street. So that's always when someone's looking to free up funds for another investment, those are great sellers to go ahead and buy from. Number two are when an investor has problems on a deal that they don't want to deal with themselves and they just kind of want to get off their plate, right? So someone is maybe neck deep in their day job, other investments. Maybe they're going through some kind of life change, like a divorce, or they're moving or something else. And then they have a non-performing note that has some issues. Maybe they got to take it through foreclosure, and this investor doesn't typically do that. Or a deal is dragging out, it's getting complicated because the borrower filed bankruptcy, or they have property that needs a roof, or there's some other complicating factor. Oftentimes, investors will just sell this note, maybe take the loss and get it off their plate. Let someone else deal with it so they can focus their time and attention on the things that are most important to them. This is another thing that's relatively relatively common. So if you're the kind of note investor who can handle foreclosures and handle some of these complicated deals, you might be able to pick them up from people who don't want to deal with them. Um, the other reason, so reason number three, is their business model calls for it. So a lot of people, not me specifically, but there are lots of funds and note investors out there who will pick up non-performing loans, try to work something out with the borrower to keep them in the home and get the loan reperforming. But if that doesn't work, instead of carrying it through the foreclosure, they'll just sell the note off to someone else. In fact, a lot of the loans that I bought, especially a lot of the loans I was buying a couple years ago, had been kind of passed around from several different owners who would try to work something out with the borrower, didn't work, sell it, and then the next person would do that and rinse and repeat. Now, there's nothing wrong with that business model. What that enables those people to do is they can focus their time and attention on their loss mitigation, buying new loans, and they're not having to deal with the time and expense of foreclosures, bankruptcies, and dealing with REOs, and all the other things that come with that. It also isolates them a little bit from the risk of those, right? So when you take a loan all the way through the foreclosure process, you get the property back. You haven't seen the inside of the property beforehand. It's kind of like the grand prize game. You don't know what's behind the door until you all get all the way through, right? And sometimes they're a home run, and sometimes, yikes, like you can get upside down. So what they're doing is, they're going through their loss mitigation process. And if that doesn't work, they're reselling the loan probably at a small loss. I'm sure mileage varies. But they're not having to deal with all the expense and time and work of foreclosures and REOs, and they're isolating themselves from some of the risk that that comes with that. So that's a very common reason why people sell loans. Now, I mentioned that's not my model. Excuse me. What my model is, I don't buy any loan unless I'm willing to take it all the way through foreclosure and go all the way to the mat. I like that because one, it enforces a certain level of discipline when I'm doing my due diligence and screening these loans in the first place. And the second reason is I've had more than a few loans where borrowers have reinstated at the last minute, and I wouldn't have gotten that reinstatement unless I was willing to take it all the way to the end. So, it's not that one business model is good or bad. Some people do it one way. I like to do it my way. You'll ultimately need to decide for yourself how you want to proceed. But that's reason number three. So reason number four is the seller ended up with a loan that they didn't want. So you might ask the question, like, how does a seller end up with a loan that they didn't want to buy? Well, the answer is a lot of times when loans trade, they either can trade maybe as part of like a larger portfolio. It could be 10, 20, even hundreds of loans, or it could be a small package. Like I've picked up a number of these where the borrowers may be selling 4 or 5 loans. Or, I'm sorry, where the seller's selling 4 or 5 loans. And when this happens, the seller is selling these as a package, right? So if you're buying a package of loans, it's fairly rare that every loan in that package is going to be something that suits your business model, is in the states that you want to operate in, is going to be right in your wheelhouse, something that you want, right? So what you do when you're buying one of these packages is you kind of price it based on the loans you are most interested in, and then often you sell off the ones that you didn't want. So when you see loans for sale, some of these might be ones where the buyer, or the seller bought a portfolio and then is getting rid of some of the loans that they don't want to keep, but they had to buy these loans to get the whole package and get the loans that they did want. So that's super, super common reason. Reason number five why someone will sell you a loan, and this is like my favorite, this is where I've had like probably the most success, is when someone is closing a fund. So a lot of note funds, you can set these up like a million different ways. But a lot of time, oftentimes they have some lifespan, 3, 5, 7 years, where they make the deal with their investor. Okay, this fund is going to run for X number of years. And then when we're done, we're going to sell the assets and then make distributions to the investors. And so your seller may be a fund that's in this phase of their life cycle. And I find that I have the most success here is because the sellers are motivated, right? Like they're selling the note. It's not one of these situations where like you see a lot of loans listed for sale and blasted out through brokers where the seller isn't actually interested in selling that loan. They're just kind of fishing. It's like, yeah, I'll just hang these out here. And if someone's willing to make a mistake and overpay, then I'll sell it to them. But they're not really willing to sell them for prices to make sense. They're kind of like phantom listings. When you see someone that's closing a fund, that they're going to move these assets one way or another because they're obligated to for their investors. So this is really nice. You tend to have better interactions with the sellers. You can tend to get better pricing, and you can devote more time to your due diligence and screening because it's a real deal and not one of these phantom deals. You don't want to waste your time scrubbing phantom deals. So that's reason number five. Reason number six is if it's someone who owns a seller finance note that wants to cash out and get a lump sum. So when a lot of people are, not necessarily note investors, but they're selling a property, maybe it's in a rural area, maybe it's a, sub $100,000 property where it's not easy to find a buyer who's going to be able to get a conventional loan. They'll do seller financing, create their own note to complete the sale. So at this point now they're collecting a payment stream, which is great. But maybe they're a retiree, maybe they have something they want to do. And instead of collecting those payments for the next 30 years or 20 years or whatever, they want to cash out and get a lump sum. They can do that by selling this note that they had created previously. These are also very good deals. You tend to find these deals through certain brokers who specialize in finding them. So There are a number of people out there who their whole business is going out there and hunting and finding owners of these seller finance notes and then seeing if they want to sell and get a lump sum. It's almost like when, people win the lottery, right? And they get this like 20-year payment stream and they don't want that. There are people who will go around and pay them a lump sum to get that future cash flow. And that's what you're doing here. So that's reason number six. Reason number seven is really related to this. So it can be an investor who created a seller finance note as a means to getting an exit. So a lot of times when you have REOs or maybe someone's doing a fix and flip, right? Same kind of idea as reason number six, where maybe it's like a lower dollar property or, they want to sell to a buyer that can't get conventional financing. They'll create a note as their exit strategy for this REO or this other property. And so sometimes investors create these notes with the intention of immediately reselling the note, right? So those can be good deals as well. The things you got to be careful with these, right, is if it's an investor doing it deliberately as an exit and their intent is to sell the note, they may not have underwritten that as well as they should have. And they have a tendency to try to oversell the borrower and sell it for too much. So those in particular, where there's investors creating a note, you want to be super, super careful about the value of the property and do some real vetting on that. Because what happens is the seller finance borrowers, their point of comparison is rental prices, right? So in a lot of neighborhoods might say, hey, renting a house is going to cost me 900, 1,000 a month. Oh, cool. I can buy this thing on seller financing. It's 500 or 600 a month. It's cheaper. Awesome. But they may not have noticed that, they just paid 80, $90,000 for a $60,000 house. So you got to tread. Those can be really good deals, but you just got to make sure you vet those particularly well and tread lightly on the property value and just don't take the seller's word for it. Okay, so that brings us to reason number eight, which is the final reason. And like I said, these are in no particular order, so there's nothing particularly outlandish about this one. But a lot of times, people who own notes are using outside funding to fund those deals. I personally do that all the time. And so sometimes you have an investor who wants to cash out. So similar to like reason number one, and I've had this happen a number of times where I have an investor in a deal and they find some multifamily deal or some shiny object that they want to go chase and they say, hey, Dan, can I cash out of this? Right. And so what I will generally try to do is find another investor just to kind of take over that investor and swap them out. But I've also bought notes where people had this situation. And so I said, okay, fine, I'm going to sell the asset so I can pay the investor back. And maybe we book a profit. So that's another common thing that happens all the time. Like I mentioned in number one, like a lot of the people that are active in notes are active in all sorts of other things as well. And they're often like finding new deals and shifting money around. And so there's often a lot of wheeling and dealing that goes on in this environment. So I hope that helps you understand why it is that someone is willing to sell you a note and kind of solves that mystery for you. All right, I'll see you next time. Thanks.